Welcome to another episode of the Strength Log. My name is Philip Wildenstam. I'm a co-founder of Strength Log and a certified nutrition coach.
And I'm Daniel Richter, CEO of Strength Log and certified personal trainer. And also a bench presser. Though actually I haven't bench pressed for several weeks now. I'm doing tons of push-ups and dips. So I might have to amend to that.
I haven't bench pressed for like 4 hours. So...
Yeah, you're about to ripe for another session.
I actually hit a yearly record this morning and also a small PR.
Oh, yeah?
But I'm doing feet up bench press, which I have been doing for almost 5 years now.
Yeah.
And recently I also moved my grip in, so I'm doing medium grip.
So it's one of those PRs
no,
where you're... No,
I haven't switched the exercise. It's still just the original feet up bench press. But the PR was like, I did 31 reps at 70 kilos as my final max rep set. And I did 30 reps years ago, and then I haven't cared about it.
Yeah.
And years ago, I probably could have done 45 or something. It was more of a warm-up back then. But still, a PR is a PR.
One of the nice free features in our app Strength Log, which is a workout tracker, and you should be using it. And we're going to talk about it all the time in this podcast. But first, we're going to talk about bench pressing. And what we're kicking off today is a series of 6 episodes on what we've coined the Big 6 exercises or movements. And the idea here is that we're going to cover the best and most popular and the exercises you should be doing.
The fundamentals of strength training 2025.
To cover all your major muscle groups.
Yeah.
And so the big 4, which we usually refer to in this podcast, is pushing movements, pulling movements, squatting, and hip hinging. But now in the big 6, we've divided the pushing and pulling into horizontal pushing and pulling, like bench pressing and rows, and vertical pushing and pulling, so like shoulder presses and pull-ups. And today marks the first part of this series, and we're going to talk about... Well, we titled this The Bench Press, but the idea is that this episode is going to go for most forms of chest presses. So even if you don't particularly like the bench press and you do say that you do dips or push-ups or machine chest presses or dumbbell chest presses, you're going to take away a lot from this episode anyway. That's our intention, at least. But we are going to focus in on many details in the bench press as well, because we know that the bench press is an extremely popular lift, and a lot of people want to get stronger in it.
I would say it's the most popular lift in the world.
Yeah, out of gym lifts.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe push-ups is more popular.
Yeah,
because,
like crunches. Yeah, things you can do in your home.
But also people that do crunches at home, they tend to either advance to the gym or give up.
Yeah. No, but once again, data from our app shows that the bench press is the most tracked exercise in it. Last time I checked, 10% of all sets were from the bench press. And number 2 is the squat, number 3 is the deadlift. Both of these are coming up in the upcoming episodes. But yeah... bench pressing, we already mentioned, it's one of the most popular gym exercises in the world. It is also one of the 3 power lifts in the sport of powerlifting, which has bench pressing, squatting, and deadlifting. You and I have been into powerlifting earlier on in our lifting careers. You're retired from it. I'm kind of on the way out as well, I feel, but I do have some milestones I want to check off before I completely hang up my lifting belt on the shelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been lifting. We've been bench pressing for a while.
But are we any good at it?
No, but we are happy amateurs.
The bench press was by far my worst power lift. But it was also the lift I trained the most. I went the hardest because I wanted it to get up to the level of the other lifts. So, and as the expression goes, if you want to learn something, don't ask someone who was a natural talent. Ask someone who struggled
exactly.
with it. Because if you struggle with it, you actually need to learn stuff about it,
and
figure things
think
out.
about it.
Yeah, think about it. If I went to the gym, and the first time I ever bench pressed, I put up 315 pounds. Yeah, good for you, fucktard.
But yeah, my best bench press is 162.5 kilos in a competition that's almost 360 pounds. And I just mention it to kind of, I don't know, we're probably going to reference some studies in this episode, but I suppose that's a form of authority for some, and others are going to think it's a little weak.
And I'm just below you when it comes to the competition bench. I did 160 kilos at my last competition. And then 6 months later, I did 165 in the gym.
Nice.
But that doesn't count because there were no judges there. And I probably let my butt leave the bench.
You think?
Yeah, I always did.
Oh, shame on you. So I would like to argue, before we get into all the technique details and the biomechanics of it, that the bench press actually deserves its popularity, because I think it is a very good lift. It is excellent for building your pec muscles, your front delts, decently good at building your triceps, and it's at a sweet spot when it comes to like instability, because you need to balance the barbell, but not too much instability, turning into something that is not effective for strength training. But it still leaves you enough room to like adjust it to your individual anatomy, in contrast to at least old chest press machines. It does carry some risks of you dropping the barbell on you, so you need to have a spotter or set up some safety bars to be like 100% safe. But yeah, it's I don't have an issue with the bench press being a very popular lift.
No, neither do I usually say that I think the overhead press, the standing overhead strict press, is a better lift. But when I think about it, I've had long periods where I've had like back pain or stuff like that, where when I couldn't even do the overhead press because it hurt too much, and I could always continue benching. The bench press is almost always there for you. It's a comfortable lift as you age and get some more nagging pains. If your back hurts, maybe don't arch as much. Just lay flat on the bench and you can still do the lift. It's always going to be there.
Yeah, and it is also standardized. As long as you have a standard Olympic barbell, the ones that are 220 centimeters and 20 kilos, and you have a decent workout bench. Those vary a bit until you learn which ones are the good ones for bench pressing. But as long as you have the proper equipment, a bench press is the same in all parts of the world. Yeah. In contrast to machines being of 100 different brands or more, making it more difficult to find the one that you are used to using.
And also for comparison's sake, if you go up to a person and say, I can chest press this much in this machine, that means nothing to another person if they don't use the exact same machine. But the bench press is like, how much do you bench, bro? And you tell them your number and they judge you a bit.
Yeah, they do. All right, so our plan for this episode is that we're going to begin with talking about some of the technique details and biomechanics, beginning kind of from a body part perspective, like where should you put your hands and feet and things like that. Then we're going to get into how to actually perform the lift in detail, and we're going to finish off talking about the muscles worked a bit more, and some common problems and mistakes and training guidelines. So yeah, we got a lot to cover, and let's jump in with the technique and biomechanics. And I suppose just to get everyone on the same page, let's just make a super quick brief overview of what we're talking about. So the bench press is you're lying down on a bench, you have a barbell in the rack above you, you unrack the barbell, you lower it down to your chest, you press it back up again, and then if you're going to do more reps, you do more reps, otherwise you rack it again. Yeah. But that's what we're talking about. So, beginning from the feet or the hands, which end do you want?
I mean, there's several bench press variations where your feet are not involved. So maybe start at the hands.
Yeah, because the hands or your grip determines quite a bit about the bench press. Because the main working muscles in the bench press are going to be your chest muscles or pecs and your frontals, and these act on your upper arm bone or your shoulder joint. And then you got the triceps, which work on your elbow joints. And the grip width that you take is going to determine how this load is shared, either by the pecs and frontals contra the triceps. So when you take a wider grip, you're distributing more of that work to your pecs and frontals, and when you take a closer grip, you send more of that work to your triceps. And we do have some data on this from one nice study out of Norway, I think. They found that in a close grip bench press, and the definition here was that the close grip was with your hands just above your shoulders. This is a very narrow grip, in my opinion. That's not comfortable at all for me. But even in such a close grip, they found that in the hardest part of the lift, the pecs and frontals still contributed 2/3 of the force, and the triceps just contributed 1/3 of the force. When they tested a wider grip, which was between 1.5 up to 2 times the shoulder width, they found that the pecs and frontals stood for almost 4/5, 78% of the force at the hardest part of the lift, and just 22% came out of the triceps. And just for curiosity's sake, the hardest part in the bench press, where the force we can generate is the lowest, is typically just a few inches above our chests. So not the absolute bottom. Gonna vary between people, of course, but generally somewhere around there.
Do you know, Daniel, that some bench presses, they don't even lift more than like 1 inch in the bench press?
Yeah, that's true. You're referring to extreme arches. Yeah. So I want to make a couple of points about this distribution of work, because my hypothesis is that when you're taking a closer grip and you're shifting more work to the triceps, I'm not certain that it actually means that your triceps are doing more work. I mostly think it's your pecs and frontals doing less work. So even if you want to build your triceps, I'm not certain if it makes a huge difference to use a much closer grip. Maybe a bit, but I think a large portion of that difference is that you're not really benefiting your triceps. You're just hampering your chest and frontals. Maybe. So while we're on the topic of grip width and which grip width one is going to use, if you want to lift a lot in the bench press, we have studies that show that people are in general around 5 to 6% stronger with a wide grip bench press than a close grip bench press. So if you want to lift as much weight as possible, avoid the super narrow grip, unless you are an outlier and you are stronger with that grip width. But in general, test out the wider grip widths. Even though those might feel a bit off to you in the beginning. It's not a completely natural position for everyone.
But I mean, if you're a beginner and it feels super unnatural having the maximum width grip allowed, which is 81 centimeters between your fingers.
Your index fingers.
And that can feel really awkward for some people. You can work up to it. You don't have to start there. Start with something that feels comfortable, which is usually closer to a medium grip for a lot of people.
Pink is on the rings that mark this distance, which is a bit annoying. Standardized barbells, they have ring markings to show you where the maximum grip width is, either in powerlifting or in Olympic weightlifting. The thing is just that those distances are different. Because in weightlifting, you're allowed to have your... I know that you're allowed to grip it however you want, but there are ring markings 91 centimeters apart. And in powerlifting, you can't have a wider grip than your index fingers on the ring markings that mark 81 centimeters or 32 inches.
It's a good idea if you're uncertain of what your gym offers to bring a tape measure to the gym and actually measure this. Because if they are 91 centimeters apart, maybe put your pinky fingers on the rings instead. And if they are 81 centimeters apart and you want to have a maximum grip width, then put your index fingers on the ring.
Yeah. If you care about the powerlifting rules at all. If you're just doing it for training, find something that is comfortable for you. Oftentimes, like one hand's width outside of your shoulders is a good starting point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is the grip. Begin at that width and then try what feels good for you.
One final note on the grip.
Yeah.
Don't do the suicide grip.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Please avoid it. A suicide grip is when you have your thumbs on the same side as your fingers. So you're not actually gripping the bar in a safe way. It can roll out of your palms and kill you.
Yeah, no, really.
And people do this because they say it feels better in the shoulders or their elbow joints. But you can work around this. You can learn how to grip the barbell. Find a good position with your thumb around the bar so you have a safe grip.
Yeah.
The suicide grip is a mirage, or whatever you say. It's dangerous and stupid and just bad.
Yeah. So thumb opposing the other fingers.
Exactly.
And well, then we got the wrist, and this has been a topic of some debate, with some people arguing that you should keep your wrist perfectly straight when you're gripping the barbell. That only works with super light weights. So in order to keep the barbell in your hand, you need to actually tilt your wrist back a little bit to rest the barbell right on top of your wrist or your forearm, really, to keep it there. Some people tilt their or lean their hands back all the way. I find that a bit uncomfortable. So something in between a straight and maximally extended wrist is probably a good thing.
Listen to your body once again. It's going to feel more comfortable if you're not trying to keep your wrist totally straight or completely bent backwards. Somewhere in the middle is going to feel natural and safe and strong.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into some common problems, and one of the ones that I've jotted down as a bullet point is shoulder pain from doing too much bench pressing too soon. But I just got reminded that wrist pain is also fairly common when people start bench pressing, because I mean, if you work at a computer, you don't really have super strong wrists from manual labor or anything like that. So this is another reminder to begin with low volume when you get into the bench press, and take your time building it.
But it's also sort of like a badge of honor to get some pains after benching for like 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through it. It just means you're serious, Daniel.
Yeah, and I mean, my wrist pain just took like 5 years to go away.
Yeah. And I've gotten repeated problems with pain in like the bottom part of my thumbs. So pain can arise almost anywhere.
Okay, let's not scare anyone off. But do start with the small volumes. We need to move on to the elbows.
Macaronis.
Macaronis?
Elbow macaronis.
Okay. Okay, so this is another topic where ardent bench pressers have had very strong opinions, and in later years I think that we've started to glean from research studies that it doesn't seem to matter a whole ton where you put your elbows, as long as it feels good for you, that it's comfortable and you feel strong. Like, your two edge cases is to either lower the barbell with your elbows close to your sides, like pointing down towards your feet, or keeping your arms 90 degrees out to the sides. Something that is commonly referred to like a bodybuilder's bench press or a guillotine bench press, because you will lower the barbell almost up at your throat. And my recommendation for almost everyone is to begin with something in between, like 45 degrees out with your arms, and then try keeping your elbows a little closer, try keeping them a little bit wider out, see where you feel strong and what is comfortable for you. Because this is going to vary a lot between different people, because your shoulder joints and your elbow joints and your wrist joints are going to vary in their anatomy. So one movement isn't going to be the same for everyone. And it might also change during your career, when maybe your triceps get stronger, then a couple of years later your chest gets stronger. So this can change and adapt.
And it's also going to change if you change your grip width. If you go from a close grip bench press or like a closer medium grip out to a wide grip. Because if I'm even going to be able to do a really close grip, I'm going to have my elbows close to my body. But if I'm going to do a super wide, they are going to be more out from my body. It's just where they need to be for me to be able to do the lift.
Yeah. And once again, on the distribution of work between your pecs and front delts versus your triceps, if you keep your elbows super close to your body and pointing them towards your feet, you're going to limit how much your chest and front delts can help out in the lift. So yeah, that's going to leave more work for your triceps. If you put your elbows out to the sides a bit more, then you're going to be able to involve your pec muscles much better. You're going to be able to involve pretty much every muscle fiber in your pecs, making it a great chest exercise. And I still think that your triceps is pretty much going to work as much as when you lowered the barbell lower on your body and kept your elbows to your sides. You're just going to be able to use more weight. But if your reason for training the bench press is to lift as much weight as possible, well, yeah, experiment to see where you feel strong. Probably around the 45-degree mark is my guess, plus minus 15 degrees. And if your goal is to develop your chest and your front delts, I still think something like 45 degrees is a good starting point. Maybe slightly wider. Experiment to see where you feel that great stretch in your pecs.
Yeah. So what to do about the shoulders, Dan?
Yeah, those are an important joint in the bench press. Too bad that we don't really know much about what is the correct position of the shoulders, but that doesn't keep people from having very strong opinions about it.
No, I just remember more than 10 years ago when I tried to actually learn the bench press in a decent manner, and I was so focused on having my shoulder blades back and down so that I could hardly move laying there on the bench. It feels like, yes, my shoulders didn't move, but I couldn't. The lift never felt comfortable, and then I started to relax my shoulder blades a bit more, let them move around a bit more, and everything felt a bit better. It's weird like that.
It's a bit like the spine. If it wasn't meant to bend, then why is it the most articulated joint or collection of joints in a body? So, for those who wonder what we're talking about, if you go to many powerlifters and many personal trainers who have been educated on the bench press, they are going to be adamant that you pull your shoulder blades back and down. The going recommendation is to put them in the opposing back pocket.
Yeah.
And the explanation is going to be to stabilize them and to protect them, things like that. We have definitely said this 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I was sold that was the solution.
Yeah. It's just that the more I think about it, the more I kind of question it and compare it to other pressing exercises like dips or push-ups or whatever. So I'm a bit more careful in my recommendations now. And I mean, especially because the shoulder joint is super mobile. And is it really so bad if it moves a bit? A recommendation to you is try bench pressing in different ways. If it feels weird on your shoulders, try pulling your shoulder blades back and down a bit. If that feels weird, well, relax a bit, just like you mentioned. And I don't know if this is old eureka moment for me. I wonder if this recommendation is a remnant from geared powerlifting, meaning lifting with a powerlifting shirt. Because then if you have, that is basically a super tight shirt that helps you lift the barbell. And if you pull your shoulder blades back, then you're going to pre-stretch that shirt, making it help you more in the lift. I wonder if this is where this recommendation comes from. Meaning that it doesn't apply to people lifting without a shirt, because we do have other old remnants of recommendations coming from geared powerlifting. For instance, that the lats are super important because you might need to pull the barbell down against the shirt, and also weird recommendations regarding your triceps importance.
Yeah.
So maybe but we still need to recommend the beginner to do something. And what I usually do now when I coach someone in the bench press is I don't really mention the shoulders. I just let them bench and see how that feels.
Yeah.
If necessary, I tell them to pull them back or down a bit.
But I mean, the main goal is to find stability on the bench. And when you're a beginner, it feels really unstable. And you might even have troubles laying in the middle of the bench. So one of your shoulder blades are on the outside of the bench and one is completely on it. And everything just feels weird. And doing this stuff with your shoulder blades might help you actually find a more stable position on the bench.
Might. it's not that this recommendation is wrong. It's more that respect that we don't know if it's right. So it might be a good idea.
If you're new to the lift, it's going to be like driving a car for the first time, and especially if you try to learn to drive using a stick, and you can't even look at the road because you're so focused on everything going on inside the car. Where is my left foot supposed to be? Where is my right foot supposed to be? How do I shift gear using the stick? And I'm gonna turn, so I need to signal. Where do I signal my turn? And and suddenly you have driven over a family of 5.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I mean, for someone holding a heavy, uncomfortable barbell, trying to hit their sternum or something like that, keeping in mind that they need to control their shoulder blades, which they might have never even thought about before, that is complicated.
And you need to control your feet as well, and you need to control your elbows and everything.
But I came to think about, if you are bench pressing and you want to lift as much weight as possible, it might help your leverages to pull your shoulders back, because I think you might be creating a better line of pull for your pec muscles. So it might be a good thing. Try it out, see how it feels.
Yeah.
So opposing back pockets, that's the general recommendations. Let's throw it out there to be safe.
Let's talk about the head and the ass.
Yeah, which is your favorite?
They are the same thing for me.
Yeah. So, head and the butt. Not as much to say about these body parts. My recommendation is that you keep them both in contact with the bench at all times.
Yeah.
At least in the International Powerlifting Federation, you have to keep both your head and your butt on the bench throughout the whole lift. For training purposes, I suppose it doesn't matter a whole ton if you lift your head off the bench, but I'm a purist, so I'm a bit annoyed by it. But it does matter if you lift your butt, because lifting your butt in the bench press is equivalent to quarter squatting or half squatting. Because when you are lifting your butt, you are raising your entire body, especially your chest, meaning that the barbell won't travel as far down as if you would keep your butt on the bench. And the main problem with this, apart from that it decreases your range of motion, giving you a lesser training effect, is that you are no longer standardizing your lift. So if you listen to the previous episode, which I highly recommend, where we talk about principles for highly effective strength training, we talk about the value of progressive overload, and it requires that you track what you do to be able to do more the next time. And to be able to do that, you need to standardize your lifts and do them the same every time. And if you start lifting your butt, you don't do that.
And you look silly. And people will laugh at you and judge you.
At least the ones that know what they do.
So, but the main reason is lift standardization. I've never really understood why you can't lift the back of your head from the bench like an inch, if that feels comfortable, but you're not allowed to in the IPF where we used to compete, or where I used to compete, you still compete in.
Yeah.
But still, it's good to have a standardized lift.
It is. All right, moving on down the body, or at least from the shoulders, to our spine, or our backs, or our torso, and the topic of arching, which is when you bend your back to create an arch shape, an upside down U shape. And this is something that powerlifters use in order to lift more weight in competition. They are able to lift more weight, usually like a couple of percentages more, a lot more for some lifters who arch a lot. But for most people, it's just a couple of kilos. The reason people arch is, well, at least twofold, or I should say the reason they are able to lift more weight is at least twofold. The first reason is that they seem to put their pec muscles in a slightly more beneficial angle of pulling, but mostly it's about number two. They are shortening the range of motion through the heaviest part of the lift. So the part of the lift where we are the weakest, that is what you're chipping away at when you are arching, which makes it very beneficial if you're competing and trying to lift as much weight as possible. The drawbacks of this is that, number one, you get a worse training effect, because long range of motions are where the good stuff happens in strength training generally, and where your muscles are stretched and working hard. That is very good for signaling muscle growth and also strength gains. So you're missing out on that if you arch excessively. And number two, if you exaggerate it, it looks ridiculous.
It does. No, but if you're not planning to become the world's strongest IPF bencher in the world, you're training for athletic performance or just muscle growth, don't do it. Arch a tiny bit just to make the lift feel better.
I forgot to mention that, but some people like it more on their shoulders. Maybe because the range of motion has been shortened and their shoulders aren't really comfortable in that end range. So yeah, arch a bit for that reason. I still have ingrained the habit of arching, and I still have one foot in the powerlifting world, so I arch quite a bit when I bench press. And it's a calculated decision, at least. Yeah. And I do other chest training to build up my chests.
I do feet-up bench presses for two reasons. I want a longer range of motion, and I want to keep my butt in the bench, which has been an issue for me through my whole lifting career. And by just lifting my feet off the ground and laying rather flat on the bench, I have a tiny, tiny arch just for stability on the bench. It just feels like I'm actually training.
Yeah,
what I'm supposed to be training.
Yeah, if you do want to arch, my recommendation is to at least go down to parallel with your upper arms, meaning that they are parallel to the ground, and you're probably gonna get most of the muscle growth effect for your chest and frontals. But you mentioned the feet and that you're not using them. But if you want to bench press effectively, or at least put up a lot of weight, and I suppose be stable when you're trying to build muscle, you should keep your feet on the ground and still and stable. No dancing around.
No, that's a typical beginner move. When it starts to get heavy, you start moving your feet around for some reason. It's just, that goes away for most people if they just stick to the movement.
I wonder if it's like some panic response.
Yeah, probably. Because everything feels super weird. Yeah. In the bench press for most in the beginning.
Yeah. And then we have the topic of something called leg drive, which is also super misunderstood. But it's essentially the art of pushing your feet away as if you were trying to push yourself off the head end of the bench in order to contract your leg muscles to get harder, essentially, more stable in your lower body, which then radiate onto your upper body, making you more stable in general. And more stability generally means a better bench press. So that is the idea behind leg drive. You are pushing your feet away in order to contract your leg muscles and get more stable.
But this is also where we often see the so-called leg drive just resulting in you pushing your hips up off the bench.
Lifting your butt.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So, I mean, you can contract your leg muscles without pushing your feet anywhere. You can just tense them in general.
Yeah.
Apart from that, I'm not sure that foot placement matters a ton more than finding something that is comfortable to you and then keeping your feet still at that position. I think keeping your feet fairly close to your butt, but on the floor, is a good idea for most people to start with. But really, experiment to see what you like.
And it's going to be so different. Are you a really short person or are you a super long person? At the world stage, I've seen people have their feet in the most awkward looking positions. Yeah. And if you're really short, you might even need to have like small boxes next to the bench to put your feet on, which is available at competitions for short lifters that need them.
And in the gym, if there aren't boxes available, you can use thick weight plates.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah.
If you're going to have your feet on the floor, it's a good idea to find a spot where they feel like they add stability.
Yeah, exactly. Think of yourself like a tripod or something that you're trying to make stable. Okay, so those were your different body parts and where to place them in the bench press. Now I'm thinking that we should move on to actually performing the lift. So yeah, we're making great headway here. Okay, so The lift begins with unracking, but before you unrack the bar, there are some things to just fix or check. One being just the bench itself. What is the width of the proper competition benches? It's 32 centimeters, I think. Between 30 to 32. A lot of gyms have the narrower 20 centimeter bench press. Benches which aren't as stable for you, so try to find a wide one if you have it available. And 32 centimeters into inches, what is that? Like 13 inches?
Something like that.
Something like that. So that's one thing. And the other thing is to set the bar or the rack at the proper height. And you want it to be at a height where you just need to make a small extension of your elbows and your shoulders to unrack or to clear the barbell of the hooks. You don't want to make a big pressing movement, and you don't want to have to like lift your shoulders up from the bench in order to get the barbell out.
No, the main issue the main mistake I see people making is having it way too far up, set too high, so when they go to re-rack, they have to struggle to get it in the hooks again. So it's better to be a little bit lower, so you can, like you said, just make a small movement, get them out, and then you can extend your arms.
Yeah, really experienced bench pressers only have like an inch that they need to lift the barbell out when you're like really found your groove and you're very comfortable with the particular equipment that you're using. That might be like the end goal for you, but in the beginning you're probably gonna want a couple of inches to have some more leeway.
Absolutely.
But yeah, aim for a very small and comfortable movement. And the other thing when you're gonna unrack is not to lie too far away from the barbell or too far up close to the barbell. This is going to depend on your height, because a tall lifter is going to be able to have the barbell closer down to their shoulders, so to say, and a shorter lifter is going to have it higher up, but somewhere around your nose or above your mouth is a good position to lie down under the barbell. If you're tall, it might be closer to your throat maybe, and if you're short, it might be closer to your forehead. It's going to vary a little bit. But once again, you want as small a distance as possible to be able to clear the hooks, but you don't want it to be excessively long, making it a very uncomfortable and hard movement to get that barbell out. You want to keep your energy and your position for the actual training. You want this unracking to be as much as an insignificant part of the lift as possible. So make it as easy as possible for you with the right height and positioning yourself below the barbell properly.
The good thing is that when you're just starting out in the bench press, you might even have an empty barbell, and that feels heavy for you, but it's not like a super heavy weight in absolute terms. So if you lift it out of the hooks and you have to travel a bit before it's over your chest and you jiggle a bit, that's okay in the beginning. You can improve these things as you get stronger. It's a major difference if you're going to lift out like 200 kilos from the hooks and then have to move it like 40 centimeters before it's over your chest. That would kill people.
The more you practice, the better your groove and your bar path is going to get in this regard. Another equipment note is that if you are training alone, or even if you're training with someone, in my opinion, use safety bars if they are available. They are the racks on your sides that can catch the barbell if you can't lift it up, or if something unexpected happens, like it slips out of your hands or you faint or whatever. Set them so that if you arch a tiny bit, you can touch the barbell to your chest, but if you make yourself as flat as you can, that it lands on the racks, so that it protects you, especially your face and your throat. But also makes it able to get out of there. Okay, so then in the unracking business, the next thing is to set your grip. We've covered this. Somewhere slightly outside your shoulders is a good starting point, or put them at 81 centimeters if you want to maximize the competition room, and most people are going to be the strongest at that width. You place your feet, then you inhale, If you want to pull your shoulders back, you do that, and then you unrack by just extending your elbows and your shoulders a tiny bit, and you slowly bring out the barbell until it is vertically above your shoulders. That is going to be the starting position. And when you have the barbell above your shoulders and it's still and you control it, then you start the descent. And the barbell is going to move slightly down on your chest, like towards your sternum or your lower ribs or upper abs. Once again, gonna vary with your elbow position and your grip width and your individual anatomy. So there isn't really anything right or wrong here, but your sternum is fairly long, so somewhere on that sternum is probably gonna be a good fit for most people, but not necessarily. Might be higher for some, might be lower for some. Once again, depending on the other decisions you make. And I suppose my main point for the descent otherwise is to control it.
Absolutely. Don't bomb the barbell down to your chest. Don't bounce it on your chest.
Yeah. You're decreasing your training effect if you do that, and you increase your injury risk. And once again, it just looks shitty.
It does. No, but you're taking away some training effect if you're just bouncing the barbell on your chest.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the book Starting Strength by Mark Ripto that he writes that imagine you have a small glass plate where you're putting the barbell down. Don't break the glass plate. It's like go down, touch it, and then go up again.
Yeah, or if you're wearing a cotton t-shirt, lower it so that the cotton compresses, but not your skin. That's another thing to think about. If we're gonna move on to the pause on the chest, my general recommendation, which I think is a good thing, is to do a micro pause. Really, no matter your goal, even if you want to build muscles or get stronger, I think doing at least a micro pause for just a moment is a good idea. Because once again, this is the sweet spot of the lift. You're stimulating your muscles a lot when they are working in this area. But I realize that it's also very uncomfortable, and you don't have to do it the same way all the time. I mean, you can cycle it a bit. I know that we talked about standardization, but you can move in and out of different techniques a bit as well. Like now I'm doing a cycle with touch and go bench press, and now I'm doing cycle of paused bench press, as long as you know what you're comparing.
But I mean, if you were to instruct 10 random people at the gym to do a micro pause, you're not even going to be able to see the pause. They are going to feel the pause in their heads.
Yeah, it makes them not bouncing if you tell them to micro pause. So that's the goal.
If you want to see a visible pause, tell them to pause for 10 seconds. And you'll see half a second. Half a second at best.
Yeah, no, that is the good point. Aim for a micro pause, and it's going to be a controlled turn.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to be in control of the weight, both on the way down and then also in the turn.
Yeah, don't use your ribs as a trampoline. Once again, if we're talking about competitions, different federations have different rules. Some required a really distinct pause. The IPF kind of used to be lean towards that a bit. Now it's more towards the micro pause area that you go down and then immediately get a press signal from the judge to press it back up.
At least if you do it with control. I still think that when you see benches that go down really aggressively, you also see the referees or the judge wait a bit until the barbell is still on the chest.
Yeah. Do it slowly and controlled, you might get that press signal faster.
Exactly.
So when you are pausing on the chest, you're not going to be able to lift as much weight, but you are going to improve your strength more in that area. So I mean, worst case, you're just getting better training if you pause a bit when you're bench pressing. So yeah, it's a good idea. At least don't bounce. But you're fine to do what's called as touch and go, which is exactly what it sounds like.
So now I have bounced the barbell on my chest.
No, you haven't.
What am I supposed
elegantly
to do?
Put it down.
Like a ballerina.
Yeah.
Lots of elegance. What am I supposed to do now?
Now you just press it up. Simple as that.
As hard as you can.
Yeah. Then you push the barbell up. There has been some studies into the proper bar path here, which typically shows that stronger bench pressers move the barbells towards their head end a bit more than novices do. whether or not that is something to aim for, or if you should just go with what feels good for you, I'm not sure. But yeah, push the barbell up until it is above your shoulders again. And I suppose, once again, experiment with different bar paths here. But realize that when you lower it down and the barbell is at your chest, it's no longer going to be directly on top of your shoulder joints. It's going to be closer to your feet. So it's going to move in something of a J shape. Another point for pressing the barbell up is that it seems to help to exhale or grunt or hiss out air between your teeth, something where you're contracting your core and your diaphragm, once again creating more tension in your body. Seems to help when you're pressing things up. We've seen, I don't know if it's been studied in the bench press, I don't think it has, but we know at least in like tennis players, when they grunt, they hit harder and reach higher ball speeds. And I suppose, and I believe, a similar thing goes for the bench press. And it is generally a recommendation among good bench pressers.
Yeah, I totally agree.
No. If you're doing a lot of reps, like high rep sets, it's trickier. But if you're doing a single, then yeah, do this.
But I also think it's a tool for heavier lifts. If you're doing like 20 reps, it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
I might do several reps in between each breath of air I take when I do high rep sets.
Yeah, we didn't mention breathing thus far, and it is a bit tricky because it varies quite a bit if you're gonna do 1 or 31 or whatever you did today.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do a heavy lift, the general recommendation is to take a big breath of air, well, for one thing, before you unrack, and then once again, when you have unracked but not yet lowered the barbell, you take that last sip of air, and then you hold your breath all the way on the descent, and then you exhale or you grunt on the way up. And if you're doing multiple reps, like 10 reps or something, you might have to do something in between, like sort of this, but maybe also just breathing a bit more dynamically. Maybe breathing in on the way down and out on the way up. Or pause at the top position between each rep and exchange air at that position.
Yeah, something like that. Also, if you're new to the bench, don't think about it too much.
Yeah, it's going to come later on. Yeah.
There's so many other stuff to think about.
Yeah, and you will start with very, very light weights, so you have time to learn this. Okay, so the barbell's up. The last step is to just rack it, and I just want to urge you to do this carefully so that you actually put the barbell into the hooks before you let go of it.
I would say this is the most dangerous part of the lift. If you're not using a suicide grip and the barbell rolls out of your hands, that would be more dangerous. But I've done this so many times. I rack the bar. I think I've racked both sides, and then I start releasing it, and it just collapses on me because it's under the hooks or something.
Yeah. Or I once in a squat, I placed the barbell like on top of the hook's edge. So I thought I had put it down in the hook, but it was on top of the edge. Weird things happen, so be careful and use the safety bars.
Exactly. I always used the safety bar, so it was never an issue for me. It was never that dangerous, but I still get mad at myself when I do stupid shit like that.
Yeah. And I mean, things like that, they happen so fast that a spotter probably won't be able to react. So even if you think that, oh, I got a spotter, I don't need safety bars. Yeah, but your spotter might be distracted or not know what to look out for.
I mean, the spotter is distracted by your amazing picks.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're standing there dreaming about your picks.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That was actually performing the bench press. So next order of business is that I think we should talk a bit more nuanced about the muscles worked in the bench press. So we mentioned the pec muscles a ton of times and also the front delts. And once again, the bench press is a very good exercise for training these. We see this in a ton of studies. Like a typical rate of growth is to increase the thickness of the chest muscles by between 10 to 20%. Over 2 to 3 months of training. And that, it doesn't get better than that, basically. It's a very good exercise for training the pecs. unless you arch a ton or do something else funny. But with proper training, that's what you're looking at. There's one study I like to cite from Japan that had previously untrained beginners. They started training the bench press 3 times per week, doing 3 sets of 10 reps, progressively increasing the weights, and they did so for almost half a year. They did it for 5 months, and their pecs increased by 43% in thickness.
That's nice.
So, yeah, that is really nice. That makes a difference on your look in a t-shirt. But here's the interesting thing. Their triceps only grew by 17%, so almost a third, between a third and a half. And this is something that we see repeatedly in studies that have people bench press and measure their muscle growth, that the triceps only grows about half what the pec muscles do from the bench pressing. And in studies that compare bench pressing to pure tricep extension exercises, we also see that the triceps only grows about half from the bench press compared to pure tricep training. So this is yet another sign that while the bench press is great for your chest and front delts, it's decent for your triceps.
It's not nothing.
Exactly. It's going to give you some growth, but not complete growth. Like the name tells, the triceps has 3 heads, and it seems to be the case that it's mostly one of the heads that is used in the bench press, the lateral head, the one on the outsides of your triceps, which is the second biggest one, your triceps. The long head, which is the biggest, basically, at least in the few, it might be only one study that we have, doesn't grow at all, or it didn't in that study from bench pressing. And the medial head, which is the smallest one, grew about half as much from bench pressing as it did from pure tricep extension exercises. So yeah, like one of our earlier recommendations on tricep training, which I still think is a good idea, is that begin your tricep training with a pressing movement like the bench press or some other chest press or shoulder press variation, because that is going to work your lateral head. And then you do a pure tricep extension exercise to bring up all the heads. And you're probably going to get a really good tricep development. So yeah. Great for your chest and front delts, might be a part of the puzzle for your triceps. And then as far as other muscles go, well, the bench press is gonna train parts of your rotator cuff. So the rotator cuff is a group of muscles surrounding your humeral head, meaning the head of your upper arm bone. And it basically, its job is to keep that humeral head into its socket or in its place at the shoulder blade. So when you are doing a pressing movement and your chest muscles pull your upper arm forward, on the backside of your shoulder blade, the rotator cuff muscles are pulling that head back, so keeping it into its place. And vice versa, when you're doing a rowing movement and your back muscles pull your upper arm back, other parts of your rotator cuff is pulling your humeral head forward, keeping it in its place. So, I mean, it's funny because we had a time period like 10 years ago when people strongly recommended training your rotator cuff specifically for the bench press. But really, the bench press is a great rotator cuff exercise.
Yeah. I don't get it.
Yeah. And even weirder was the ones that had you train the rotator cuff before bench pressing, making it, tiring it out.
Yeah.
So if you do like the exercises that we're going to cover in this series on the Big Six, if you train pushing and pulling, vertical and horizontal, you are going to work your rotator cuff very well. And I don't really think it's indicated that you need to train it in some other way unless some need arises.
Yeah, exactly. If you're rehabbing your rotator cuff, follow your physiotherapist training program for your rehab. But if your rotator cuff is healthy and not bothering you, just do these fundamental movements, these big compound lifts, and reach glory.
Yeah. All right, so those are the muscles. What else we got?
At this moment in the podcast, I want to add that we have 2 previous episodes where we go much deeper into like the common mistakes in the bench press, and also that's episode 6, and in episode 17 we give you 10 tips to increase your bench press.
Nice.
So you should definitely listen to these year-old episodes.
How should one find them?
Oh, they are available at our site. So if you search for Strength Log episode 6, it's gonna be the first post. Otherwise, go into Spotify, Apple Podcast, or anywhere. Scroll down, and you find bench press in the title.
Yeah,
real easy.
Yeah.
But if you want to train the bench press, we have a lot of bench press specific training programs in our app. It's also called the Strength Log.
Yeah.
And you have written most of them, Daniel.
We have many different programs, as you mentioned. Many are free. Usually the less complicated ones and the more beginner-friendly programs are free. And then we charge your ass for the more advanced programs. But for instance, we have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced bench press program, where the beginner program has... Well, it is free. It has some simple linear periodization where you increase the weight every workout. Then when you can no longer do that, you can move on to the intermediate program, which will have you increasing the weight every week. But within the week, it's using something called daily undulating periodization, which basically means that you shift between heavy and lighter workouts. And then when you can no longer gain on that, you can move on to the advanced bench pressing programs, which will have you increase the weight each block instead. And within the block or within the program cycle, you're going to do daily undulating periodization, meaning varying between heavy and lighter sessions. And you're going to do something of a wave form in the volume and load itself. So that's just like a super quick overview. And I realized that might have sounded complicated to some people, but just if you are a beginner, begin with the beginner programs.
That's the key word, because I know that a lot of people work like this. I do too, to a big extent. I see something that's free and less complicated, and I think I want to pay for something. I want something more advanced. But that's a common mistake when you're a beginner in the gym. We talked about this in the last episode. When you're a beginner, you have less need of individualization. You have less need of these advanced strategies for putting on muscle mass and strength. And if you are a beginner and you start following a more advanced, like bench press boogie 5 days per week, after 6 weeks, the goal is to add like 2.5 kilo or 5 kilo to the barbell in the bench press. When you're a beginner, that's something you can do from workout to workout. So you're just slowing yourself down if you jump into something more advanced.
Yeah, the two biggest differences are, ones that you said, the rate of progress. You're going to gain much faster on the beginner program. And the second major difference is the training volume, which is much bigger in the more advanced programs and much lower in the beginner programs, because you don't need more volume to make gains. The biggest thing that's going to happen if you increase the volume beyond what's in the beginner programs is to increase your risk of pain in your shoulders, elbows, or wrists. So if you use a program appropriate to your training level.
Exactly. The reason we are able to charge people for the more advanced programs is these people are panicking. They are not advancing in their bench press. They have been stuck for months. They want someone to save them. And here we come to save the day.
That we do. But they do often increase their bench press.
They do.
We have another suite of bench press programs, which is the first one we wrote, one of the dancing alliteration programs, bench press boogie, which comes in a 2, 3, 4, and 5 day version, where the training volume increases in every version. So if your training level is lower, go for the 2 or 3 day versions, and then you might climb higher after that. Yeah. But really, the 2 and 3 day versions are the ones I like the most. I feel they are the most balanced ones. The 4 and 5th day versions, I don't think they are gonna fit very many people, in contrast to the 2 and 3 day version, which is gonna fit a very large proportion of people. So those are they are 6 week long programs, which is a time period we often use in our programming. Then variations of bench press boogie is part of many of our powerlifting programs, which we have a ton of for different levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And then we also have another free program called the Old School Bench Press Routine, which is at the intermediate level, a fairly aggressive, strength-focused bench press routine that might be fun to do, not something you should do from the get-go, but if you feel like you're ready for more volume and want to challenge yourself a bit.
It's a bit of a peaking program for a new PR.
Yeah, our other programs, Bench Press Boogie and the beginner, intermediate, and advanced ones, they are kind of written to be able to cycle time after time after each other, at least like 2 or 3 cycles often. Then maybe you need a small break or something. But this old school bench press routine is more like a one-off. Yeah. and then maybe you return to it after a year or something. It's not sustainable in the same way, in my opinion.
I agree. That was a lot of words about the bench press. And I know from experience, when we did the Swedish podcast for almost like 7 years, we did 21 bench press specific episodes.
Yeah.
So we're going to return again and again to this lift.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a great fundamental exercise and movement.
Yeah, and it's not only because we love talking about the bench press. You guys seems to love listening to it, and I think that's because a lot of people love the bench press, but a lot of people also struggle with the bench press. They want to find the small keys to continued success.
Yeah, exactly. They begin bench pressing and then they hit a wall a time in. Should we talk about that a bit?
If you want to.
Well, I thought about that yesterday when I was planning this episode, and my hunch is that, I mean, we humans, we have very good like control over our hands and fingers. We have a lot of innervation in it. So that means that we probably have a lot of room for improvement technically wise and like neuromuscular wise to be able to press the barbell more. But after a few months, we're gonna have to like depleted that room for progress, and we have not maxed it out, but like we've gotten most of the adaptations out of that we're gonna get. I mean, we can still get more if we keep bench pressing year after year, but a lot has happened in those first few months. And then it becomes extremely reliant on muscle mass, which is gained much slower. So that is like one of the things I think happens to people when they start bench pressing and then hit that wall. And it means that you're gonna have to start getting more hardware, which is what you're going to get in the more advanced programs when you move on to those.
And which is also probably what you want.
Yeah.
That's why you're in the gym, man. You want to look swole.
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to return to the bench press many times.
But next week, we're going to talk about the squat.
Yeah, we will. Also, one of my favorite lifts.
One of my biggest loves, and now I hate it to death. It's like I was married to the squat for a decade, and now I can't stand it.
And I've always loved it, but it has never really loved me back.
Oh, that's a sad story, bro.
Yeah, it is. And now we are... Yeah, our relationship is turbulent right now. Yeah. I think we might get into that because I'm currently in my 3rd cycle, repeated cycle of squat samba, another one of the dancing programs in our app, trying to get that 200 kilo squat.
Your Facebook relationship status with the squat, it's complicated.
Exactly. Yeah, so as you mentioned, squat is coming up next week. Then we're going to cover the deadlift, and I don't know the rest of the order, but we're going to cover the overhead press. We're going to cover rowing, and we're going to cover pull-ups or lat pull-downs in a similar manner as we did with the bench press.
Yeah.
So make sure to subscribe or follow this podcast to catch those episodes, and we will catch you next time.
Train hard, eat well, die anyway.